You meet someone who feels different, not because she's reckless or broken, but because at 33, 37, 41, she carries a particular kind of weariness that coexists with intense selectivity. She's accomplished, articulate, aware of patterns she's repeated. Yet when you offer presence, consistency, the very things she claims to want, something in her recoils. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough that you feel it. The way she leans toward the man who's ambivalent, half present, still entangled elsewhere, while you, available and willing, become background noise. The confusion isn't in her behavior alone. It's in the gap between what she says she needs and what she unconsciously seeks, between the life she's built and the emotional logic still governing her choices. This isn't about attacking anyone or diagnosing pathology. It's about understanding a pattern that creates genuine suffering for everyone involved, a pattern rooted not in malice or stupidity, but in psychological architecture formed long before conscious preference existed. The woman drawn to unavailability isn't making a mistake in the moment. She's following a blueprint etched during formative years, a template for what love feels like that has nothing to do with health and everything to do with familiarity. The unavailable man doesn't represent failure of judgment. He represents the successful recreation of an original wound, the unconscious attempt to resolve something unfinished by finding it again, and this time, winning. What most people miss is that attraction at this level isn't really about the other person at all. It's about activation, about which stimuli trigger the deepest recognition, which dynamics feel like home, even when home was never safe. For some women, particularly those whose early experiences of love were conditional, unpredictable, or emotionally withholding, availability doesn't register as attractive because it doesn't match the original imprint. The man who's present, stable, emotionally generous activates nothing. He's offering a kind of relating she never learned to metabolize, a frequency her nervous system wasn't tuned to receive. The unavailable man, by contrast, activates everything: the old need to prove worthiness, the compulsion to earn what should be freely given, the familiar ache of reaching towards someone who remains just out of reach. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat, the way unresolved psychic material pulls us towards situations that mirror the original injury, not because we want to suffer, but because some unconscious part believes that if we can just get this version right, if we can finally make this person choose us, we'll heal the original wound. It's magical thinking disguised as romantic preference, the belief that winning the unavailable man will retroactively fix what the unavailable father, the inconsistent mother, the chaotic early environment left broken. But the logic is flawed at its foundation because you can't resolve a childhood wound through an adult relationship. You can only recreate the conditions that formed it, proving to yourself again and again that love requires struggle, that presence doesn't count, that only what's difficult to obtain holds value. By 30, by 35, by 40, most women have accumulated enough relational data to recognize the pattern intellectually. They can name it, analyze it, even predict it. Yet knowledge alone doesn't dissolve the deeper pull because the pattern operates beneath cognition, in the realm of felt sense, of what the body recognizes as love, even when the mind knows better. This is why therapy sometimes fails, why insight doesn't always translate to change, because the work isn't happening at the level of understanding, but at the level of nervous system recalibration, of slowly teaching the body that safety can feel like love, that consistency isn't boredom, that availability isn't weakness or lack of value, but the foundation of actual intimacy. The unavailable man serves a function beyond the obvious. He keeps intensity high while depth remains low, provides the adrenaline of pursuit without the vulnerability of arrival, allows a woman to remain perpetually in motion without ever having to settle into the stillness where real intimacy occurs. There's a reason some women describe available men as boring, as lacking edge, as somehow less interesting than their emotionally withholding counterparts. What they're actually describing is the absence of drama, the lack of chaos, the disorienting experience of not having to fight for attention or decode mixed signals or wonder where they stand. For someone whose relational template was formed in uncertainty, clarity feels foreign, almost suspicious, as if something must be wrong with a man who simply shows up, who says what he means, who doesn't require elaborate interpretation or constant effort to maintain connection. This dynamic becomes particularly pronounced after 30 because the cultural narrative shifts. There's supposed to be urgency now, a biological clock, a narrowing window, yet the old patterns persist even as the stakes theoretically increase. The woman who spent her 20s dating unavailable men doesn't suddenly develop different circuitry in her 30s. If anything, the pattern intensifies because now there's added pressure, added anxiety, which makes the familiar dynamic even more compelling. The unavailable man provides a convenient explanation for why partnership hasn't happened yet. It's his fault, his ambivalence, his inability to commit, rather than the more difficult recognition that she might be unconsciously selecting for unavailability, that some part of her needs the obstacle in order to feel desire at all. What gets lost in the public conversation is how much this pattern protects, not the woman's heart, but her defended self, the parts that learned early on that true intimacy is dangerous, that being fully seen leads to abandonment or disappointment or the discovery of inadequacy. The unavailable man never sees her completely because he's not present enough to look that closely. He provides connection without genuine exposure, intensity without integration, the rush of pursuit without the risk of being known. Available men are threatening not because they're weak, but because they're actually there, actually paying attention, actually capable of witnessing the parts she's spent decades learning to hide, even from herself. Fromm understood this as the difference between immature and mature love. Immature love says, "I love you because I need you," while mature love says, "I need you because I love you." The woman drawn to unavailability is often still operating from the first position, seeking someone whose scarcity proves his value, whose difficulty confirms her unworthiness unless she can win him, whose ambivalence keeps her perpetually focused outward rather than inward. The available man threatens to shift the equation, to offer a kind of love that says, "You're valuable as you are, without effort, without proof." And for someone who learned that love must be earned through performance, through managing another's mood, through being whatever was needed to keep the unpredictable parent engaged, that kind of unconditional presence doesn't compute. The tragedy isn't that these women are broken or damaged beyond repair. The tragedy is that they're operating from a coherent internal logic that made perfect sense in the environment where it was formed, but now creates suffering in environments where different rules apply. The little girl who learned to read subtle shifts in her father's attention, who became expert at managing relational instability, who discovered that love came and went based on factors she couldn't control, developed a sophisticated skill set that was adaptive then, but maladaptive now. That same sensitivity, that same attunement to ambivalence, that same capacity to remain engaged despite inconsistency, served her in childhood, but sabotages her in adulthood because she's bringing tools designed for chaos into situations that require different capabilities entirely. What shifts the pattern isn't shame or judgment or even insight alone. What shifts it is the slow, often uncomfortable work of staying present when every instinct says to leave, of choosing the available man even when he doesn't activate the familiar intensity, of sitting with the disorientation of being met rather than chased, of allowing someone to be consistent even when consistency feels boring or suspicious or too easy. It's learning to tolerate the anxiety that arises when there's no puzzle to solve, no mixed signals to decode, no elaborate dance to perform. It's discovering that the flatness you feel with available men isn't their inadequacy, but your nervous system's lack of practice with stability, your body's unfamiliarity with what secure attachment actually feels like after decades of training in its opposite. The available man often suffers in this dynamic, not because he's doing anything wrong, but because he's offering something that hasn't been requested at the unconscious level, showing up fully in a relational economy that's been organized around scarcity and struggle. He experiences the confusion of being valued in theory, but rejected in practice, of hearing, "I want someone emotionally available," while watching her invest energy in someone who's anything but. The frustration is real and the pain is legitimate, but personalizing it misses the deeper mechanism. He's not being rejected because he's inadequate. He's being bypassed because he's not activating the pattern that's been mistaken for love itself. For the woman caught in this cycle, the work isn't about forcing herself to choose differently, but about examining why unavailability feels like home. What early experiences taught her that love requires struggle? What happened that made safety register as threat and chaos register as comfort? It's about recognizing that the intensity she feels with unavailable men isn't passion or chemistry or some mystical connection. It's nervous system activation, the body's recognition of a familiar dynamic, the unconscious pull toward the unfinished business that keeps promising resolution, but delivers only repetition. The path out doesn't involve settling or lowering standards, or choosing someone you're not attracted to. It involves expanding the definition of attraction beyond activation, learning to value qualities that don't spike adrenaline, developing tolerance for the vulnerability that comes with being met rather than chased. And it's discovering that the man who shows up consistently isn't boring but unfamiliar, that the flatness you feel isn't his lack of depth, but your own defended heart's resistance to actually being seen. That real intimacy feels nothing like the drama you've been mistaking for connection. The unavailable man isn't the enemy, and the available man isn't the savior. Both are playing roles in a psychodrama written long before either appeared. What changes everything isn't finding the right person, but becoming someone who can metabolize a different kind of love. Someone whose nervous system has learned that presence counts, that consistency matters, that being chosen without having to earn it isn't suspicious, but sacred. The woman who finally chooses the available man isn't compromising or settling. She's completing the developmental work her earlier environment interrupted, learning that love doesn't have to hurt to be real, that the absence of struggle doesn't mean absence of depth, that sometimes the most radical act isn't chasing the unavailable, but staying still enough to let herself be found. You can't fix this for her, and you can't convince her out of it because the pattern exists beneath language, beneath logic, in the realm where the body keeps score, and the past remains present until it's finally integrated rather than repeated. All you can do is understand that her choices aren't about you, that your availability isn't inadequacy, and that the woman capable of receiving what you're offering is the one who's already done the work of distinguishing between what feels familiar and what actually serves her becoming whole.